Standing in the marble lobby of Corporate Excellence Dynamics at 9:15 on a Wednesday morning, watching my former manager Derek Miller hastily pack his belongings into a cardboard box while two security officers observed his every movement, I couldn't suppress the smile spreading across my face. The same man who had publicly berated me just 6 weeks ago for being, quote, chronically late and lacking professional discipline, was now being escorted out of the building, his access cards revoked, and his corner office stripped of the authority he had wielded so carelessly. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. But this isn't a story about petty revenge or workplace drama. This is about what happens when someone attacks the wrong person for the wrong reasons, not realizing that the quiet, seemingly disorganized employee they've been targeting actually controls something far more important than they could ever imagine. 6 weeks earlier, I thought I had finally found a workplace where my unique skills would be appreciated, and my unconventional approach to time management would be understood. My name is Sarah Chen, and at 27, I had built what most people would consider an impressive career in operations management, though the path hadn't always been smooth. Working at Corporate Excellence Dynamics, a mid-sized consulting firm specializing in organizational efficiency for Fortune 500 companies, seemed like the perfect opportunity to apply my expertise in systems optimization and workflow coordination. The company occupied 4 floors of a prestigious glass tower in downtown Seattle, complete with panoramic views of Elliott Bay and the Olympic Mountains. Corporate Excellence Dynamics had earned a reputation for transforming chaotic business operations into streamlined, profitable systems, and their client roster included some of the most recognizable names in technology, healthcare, and manufacturing. The office environment reflected their commitment to precision and excellence, with sleek conference rooms, state-of-the-art technology, and an atmosphere that buzzed with the energy of ambitious professionals solving complex problems for equally ambitious clients. I had been recruited specifically for my background in operational logistics and my unusual ability to see patterns and inefficiencies that others missed. During my interview process, the hiring team had been impressed by my portfolio of successful process improvements at previous companies, including a manufacturing optimization project that had saved my former employer over $3 million annually, and a supply chain restructuring initiative that had reduced delivery times by 40% while cutting costs by 25%. What made my approach different from traditional operations management was my focus on temporal dynamics and scheduling optimization. While most people thought about business processes in terms of tasks and resources, I understood that time itself was the most crucial variable in any operational equation. My ability to visualize complex scheduling interdependencies and identify bottlenecks in timing sequences had made me invaluable at every company where I had worked, even when my managers didn't fully understand the methodology behind my recommendations. Corporate Excellence Dynamics had hired me as a senior operations analyst, reporting to Derek Miller, the director of operational systems. Derek was 38 years old and had been with the company for nearly 7 years, working his way up from a junior consultant position to his current leadership role overseeing a team of 12 analysts and coordinators. He had a reputation within the company for being detail-oriented and demanding, qualities that were generally viewed as positive attributes in an organization that prided itself on delivering flawless results to high-stakes clients. From my first week at Corporate Excellence Dynamics, I could sense that Derek was uncomfortable with my working style and approach to time management. Unlike most employees who arrived at the office by 8:30 a.m. and maintained predictable schedules throughout the day, I operated according to what I called optimal workflow patterns that aligned my most intensive cognitive work with the natural rhythms of the business operations I was analyzing. This meant that some days I would arrive at the office at 7 a.m. to catch the early morning data processing cycles, while other days I might not appear until 10 a.m., because I had been working from home during off-peak hours when I could access systems without competing with regular business traffic. My schedule was carefully calibrated to maximize my effectiveness and minimize disruption to the operational processes I was studying, but to someone who didn't understand the complexity of my work, it probably appeared random and unprofessional. Derek's discomfort with my schedule became apparent during our first one-on-one meeting, when he made pointed comments about the importance of maintaining consistent professional presence and setting a good example for junior team members. I attempted to explain that my variable schedule was actually strategically designed to optimize my analytical capabilities, and that my productivity metrics exceeded those of colleagues who maintain traditional office hours. But Derek seemed more focused on the appearance of conformity than the substance of my contributions. The friction between us intensified during my second month at the company, when I submitted a comprehensive analysis of the firm's internal operational inefficiencies. The report, which had taken me 3 weeks to compile, identified significant problems with meeting scheduling, resource allocation, and interdepartmental communication that were costing the company an estimated $400,000 annually in lost productivity and missed opportunities. My analysis revealed that corporate excellence dynamics, despite its expertise in optimizing other organizations, had never systematically examined its own operational workflows. The company's meeting culture was particularly problematic, with executives and senior staff frequently scheduling overlapping commitments that created cascade delays throughout project timelines. The absence of centralized scheduling coordination meant that critical decisions were often postponed because key personnel couldn't align their availability, leading to extended project cycles and frustrated clients. More significantly, I had discovered that the company's billing and project management systems were operating on incompatible scheduling frameworks that created gaps in time tracking and resource utilization reporting. These gaps weren't immediately visible to individual department managers, but they were systematically undermining the company's profitability and creating compliance risks with clients who required detailed documentation of consultant time allocation. Derek's response to my report was surprisingly dismissive. Rather than engaging with the substantive findings and recommendations, he focused on criticizing the methodology I had used to gather the data and questioning whether my analysis was based on sufficient observation time. He seemed particularly bothered by the fact that I had identified inefficiencies in his own department's scheduling practices, suggesting that I was overstepping my role as an analyst by commenting on management decisions. The confrontation that would ultimately define our working relationship occurred during the monthly operations review meeting in late October. Derek had called the meeting to discuss quarterly productivity metrics and upcoming client deliverables, and the conference room was filled with senior staff from across the organization, including several vice presidents and the chief operating officer. I had prepared a presentation outlining potential improvements to the company's project scheduling systems that could reduce client delivery times by an average of 15%, while increasing consultant utilization rates. The recommendations were based on detailed analysis of scheduling patterns and resource allocation data that I had been collecting since my arrival at the company. When Derek introduced my segment of the presentation, his tone was noticeably cool and professional rather than supportive. As I began explaining my findings about scheduling inefficiencies and their impact on project timelines, I could see him becoming increasingly agitated, though he maintained his professional demeanor in front of the senior executives present. The presentation went smoothly until I reached the section of my analysis that dealt with management-level scheduling conflicts and their downstream effects on team productivity. I had prepared charts showing how executive calendar misalignment was creating bottlenecks that affected entire project workflows, and I had developed specific recommendations for improving coordination between department heads. Derek interrupted my presentation midway through this section, ostensibly to ask a clarifying question but actually to challenge the validity of my data collection methods. He suggested that my analysis was based on incomplete information and that I might not fully understand the complexity of management-level decision-making processes. The interruption was clearly intended to undermine my credibility in front of the senior staff, and I could feel the energy in the room shift as executives began to question whether my recommendations were worth considering. Derek's challenge wasn't based on any factual errors in my presentation, but rather on his apparent discomfort with having his departmental management practices scrutinized by a subordinate. I managed to complete my presentation despite Derek's intervention, but the damage to my professional standing was evident in the lukewarm response from the executive team. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Several department heads who had initially seemed interested in my recommendations now appeared skeptical, and the chief operating officer's concluding comments focused more on the need for careful validation of analytical assumptions than on the potential benefits of implementing my suggested improvements. After the meeting, Derek asked me to stay behind for what he called a feedback session about my presentation. Once the conference room had cleared, His professional facade dropped completely, and he launched into a criticism of my work that was both personal and professionally devastating. Derek's primary complaint was that my scheduling analysis reflected a fundamental misunderstanding of how the company operated, and that my recommendations would create more problems than they solved. He accused me of focusing on minor inefficiencies while ignoring the bigger picture of client relationships and business development priorities. More damaging to my confidence was his assertion that my own scheduling practices undermined my credibility as an operations analyst. Derek pointed out that I rarely arrived at the office before 9 a.m., and that my variable schedule made it difficult for colleagues to collaborate with me effectively. He suggested that someone who couldn't maintain consistent professional hours had no business recommending scheduling improvements for other people. The personal nature of his attack was unexpected and demoralizing. Derek implied that my unconventional approach to time management reflected a lack of professional discipline, and that my academic background in systems analysis hadn't prepared me for the realities of corporate consulting. He questioned whether I was truly committed to the company's success, or whether I was more interested in pursuing theoretical projects that didn't contribute to practical business outcomes. The feedback session concluded with Derek assigning me to a series of routine data entry and report formatting tasks that were significantly below my skill level and job description. He explained that these assignments would help me develop a better understanding of fundamental business operations before I would be allowed to work on more complex analytical projects. Walking back to my desk after the meeting, I felt humiliated and confused about what had gone wrong with my presentation and Derek's reaction to my work. The analysis I had presented was based on solid methodology and comprehensive data collection, and my recommendations were directly aligned with the company's stated goals of improving operational efficiency and client satisfaction. Over the following weeks, Derek's hostility toward me became increasingly obvious to other members of our team. He excluded me from important project meetings, assigned me to mundane tasks that didn't utilize my analytical skills, and made pointed comments about punctuality and professional standards during team discussions that were clearly directed at me. The isolation was professionally frustrating, but also personally demoralizing, because I had been excited about the opportunity to contribute to corporate excellence dynamics' success. The company's reputation for operational excellence had attracted me specifically because I thought my skills would be valued and my unconventional approaches would be appreciated in an environment that prioritized results over conformity. What Derek didn't understand, and what I had been unable to effectively communicate during our conflicts, was that my variable schedule wasn't a sign of unprofessionalism or lack of commitment. It was actually the result of a sophisticated understanding of the company's operational rhythms and a deliberate strategy for maximizing my analytical effectiveness. My arrival time each morning was determined by careful analysis of data processing cycles, meeting patterns, and system availability windows. On days when I arrived early, it was because I needed to observe morning startup procedures or collect data during off-peak system usage periods. When I arrived later, it was often because I had been working from home during evening hours to analyze international data feeds or complete projects without interrupting normal business operations. The scheduling system I had developed for myself was actually more rigorous and demanding than the standard 9-to-5 routine that Derek seemed to prefer. My workdays were longer and more intensive than those of my colleagues, but the timing was optimized for maximum productivity rather than maximum visibility. More importantly, Derek had no idea that my irregular schedule was actually coordinated with something far more significant than my personal work preferences. What he didn't know, and what I had been carefully avoiding mentioning during our conflicts, was that I wasn't just analyzing corporate excellence dynamics operational systems. I was actually responsible for maintaining and coordinating them. My job title of Senior Operations Analyst was technically accurate, but it didn't fully capture the scope of my responsibilities within the company's infrastructure. During my hiring process, I had been quietly assigned to oversee the implementation and maintenance of the company's integrated scheduling and resource management system, a complex software platform that coordinated everything from conference room bookings to consultant travel arrangements to client project timelines. The system, which the company had invested nearly $2 million in developing and implementing, required constant monitoring and adjustment to prevent conflicts and optimize resource utilization. My variable schedule wasn't a personal preference or a sign of unprofessionalism. It was a necessity created by the fact that I was responsible for ensuring that corporate excellence dynamics' entire operational infrastructure functioned smoothly and efficiently. Every morning when I arrived at the office, regardless of the time, I spent my first hour reviewing overnight system alerts, processing scheduling change requests, and coordinating resource adjustments that had been submitted during off hours. The complexity of this work required deep concentration and access to administrative functions that weren't available during regular business hours, when the system was actively being used by hundreds of employees. My afternoon schedule was similarly determined by operational requirements rather than personal choice. I needed to be available during peak scheduling periods when executives were making last-minute calendar changes and project managers were adjusting team assignments. The most critical period was typically between 2 p.m. and 4 p.m., when same-day scheduling conflicts were most likely to arise and required immediate resolution. The analytical work that Derek had been criticizing wasn't separate from my system administration responsibilities. It was an integral part of maintaining operational efficiency and identifying potential improvements to the scheduling infrastructure. My reports on meeting conflicts, resource allocation inefficiencies, and timeline optimization weren't academic exercises. They were practical assessments of system performance and recommendations for preventing problems that could affect client deliverables and company profitability. What made Derek's hostility particularly ironic was that his own productivity and professional success were entirely dependent on the systems I maintained. His ability to schedule meetings with senior executives, coordinate project timelines across multiple departments, and ensure that his team members were available for client deliverables relied on the scheduling infrastructure that I had been hired to optimize and maintain. The company's executives who had hired me understood this relationship clearly, which was why they had been willing to accommodate my unconventional schedule and give me the autonomy to develop my own workflow patterns. They recognized that forcing me to conform to standard office hours would actually reduce my effectiveness and potentially create problems with the operational systems that supported the entire organization. However, Derek had apparently never been fully briefed on the scope of my responsibilities or the strategic importance of my work to the company's infrastructure. His focus on surface-level measures of professional behavior like arrival times and meeting attendance had blinded him to the substance of my contributions and the critical nature of my role within the organization. This knowledge gap became increasingly problematic as Derek's criticism of my work intensified and began to affect my relationships with other team members. Several colleagues who had initially been supportive of my analytical projects started to distance themselves from me as Derek's disapproval became more obvious and public. The situation reached a breaking point during a particularly busy period in November, when the company was managing multiple high-profile client projects with overlapping deadlines. The complexity of coordinating consultant schedules, meeting rooms, and travel arrangements had increased dramatically, and I was working 12-hour days to prevent scheduling conflicts that could disrupt client deliverables. Despite my intensive efforts to maintain operational stability during this critical period, Derek chose this moment to escalate his criticism of my professional behavior. During a team meeting on November 18th, he made pointed comments about the importance of maintaining consistent presence and availability during busy periods, clearly implying that my variable schedule was creating problems for the team. The irony of his criticism was painful because I was actually working more hours and carrying more responsibility during this period than anyone else in the department, but the nature of my work made it largely invisible to Derek and other colleagues who measured productivity by physical presence in the office rather than by results achieved. Derek's comments during the team meeting were followed by an email later that day requesting a formal meeting to discuss my, quote, performance concerns and professional development needs. The tone of the message was ominous, and I suspected that Derek was building a case for disciplinary action or potentially termination based on his perception of my unprofessional behavior. The meeting was scheduled for the following Monday morning, giving me a weekend to prepare for what I expected would be a difficult conversation about my future with the company. I spent Saturday and Sunday reviewing my work performance metrics, client feedback, and system administration logs to document my contributions and defend my scheduling practices. What I discovered during this review process was both encouraging and concerning. My productivity measures were consistently above average, client satisfaction scores for projects I had supported were excellent, and system performance metrics showed significant improvements since I had taken over administration responsibilities. However, I also realized that Derek's perception of my work was based on incomplete information and misunderstanding of my role within the company. His criticism wasn't entirely unfair from his perspective, because he genuinely didn't understand what I was doing or why my schedule was structured the way it was. The documentation I compiled over the weekend painted a clear picture of the disconnect between Derek's expectations and my actual responsibilities. He was evaluating my performance based on traditional analyst metrics like meeting attendance and report production, while my primary value to the company lay in system administration and operational coordination that weren't visible through conventional management oversight. This realization led me to a strategic decision that would ultimately change everything about my relationship with Derek and my position within corporate excellence dynamics. Instead of defending my current practices during Monday's meeting, I would use the opportunity to educate Derek about the full scope of my responsibilities and demonstrate the critical importance of my work to the company's operations. The decision wasn't without risks, because revealing the extent of my system administration authority might create new tensions, or lead Derek to feel that his oversight had been circumvented by senior management. However, I concluded that continuing to operate under Derek's misperceptions would eventually create more serious problems for both my career and the company's operational stability. Monday morning arrived with the kind of gray Seattle drizzle that seemed to match my apprehensive mood as I prepared for what could be a career-defining conversation with Derek. I had spent considerable time organizing my documentation and preparing explanations that would help him understand both the technical and strategic aspects of my work. The meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. in Derek's office, a space that reflected his preference for traditional corporate aesthetics, with mahogany furniture, formal artwork, and carefully arranged awards recognizing his contributions to the company's success. The environment felt intimidating and formal, designed to reinforce hierarchical relationships rather than encourage collaborative discussion. Derek began the meeting by outlining his concerns about my performance and professional behavior, focusing primarily on scheduling issues and what he perceived as inconsistent commitment to team responsibilities. His tone was serious but not hostile, suggesting that he genuinely believed he was addressing legitimate performance problems rather than pursuing a personal vendetta. As Derek listed his specific concerns about my arrival times, meeting attendance, and availability for spontaneous collaboration, I listened carefully and took notes, waiting for the appropriate moment to present my perspective and documentation. His criticism was comprehensive and detailed, indicating that he had been observing and recording my behavior for several weeks. When Derek finished his presentation of concerns and asked for my response, I took a deep breath and began what would become the most important professional conversation of my career. I started by acknowledging his observations about my schedule and explaining that I understood why my working patterns might appear unprofessional or problematic from his perspective. Then I opened my laptop and began walking Derek through the comprehensive documentation I had prepared, starting with an overview of my system administration responsibilities and the critical importance of the operational infrastructure I maintained. I showed him system performance reports, scheduling conflict resolution logs, and efficiency metrics that demonstrated the direct impact of my work on company operations and profitability. Derek's expression shifted from skeptical attention to genuine surprise as I explained the scope of my responsibilities and the technical complexity of the systems I managed. It became clear that he had never been fully informed about my role in maintaining the company's operational infrastructure or the strategic importance of my work to the organization's success. The revelation that I was responsible for coordinating the scheduling systems that Derek himself relied on daily created a moment of recognition that fundamentally changed the dynamic of our conversation. His criticism of my time management practices suddenly seemed not just unfair but potentially counterproductive to his own professional effectiveness. As our meeting continued and I provided more detailed explanations of my work processes and scheduling requirements, Derek began to understand why my approach to time management was actually more sophisticated and demanding than the traditional office routine he had been expecting me to follow. The complexity of maintaining operational systems while conducting analytical projects required a level of flexibility and strategic thinking that couldn't be accommodated within rigid scheduling frameworks. The conversation that had begun as a performance review evolved into something more like a collaborative planning session, as Derek and I worked together to identify ways to improve communication about my responsibilities and ensure that my critical work could continue without creating misperceptions about my professional commitment. By the end of our meeting, Derek had gained a new appreciation for the scope and importance of my contributions to the company, and I had gained valuable insights into his expectations and concerns about team management. The relationship that had been characterized by misunderstanding and conflict was beginning to transform into something more collaborative and mutually supportive. However, what neither Derek nor I realized during that November meeting was that our conflicts and their resolution were being observed by other people within the company who had their own perspectives on management effectiveness and operational priorities. The story of my unconventional schedule and Derek's criticism would soon take on a life of its own within corporate excellence dynamics organizational culture, leading to consequences that neither of us could have anticipated. What I didn't anticipate was how quickly word of our private conversation would spread throughout corporate excellence dynamics, or how dramatically the company's senior leadership would respond to what they perceived as a fundamental breakdown in departmental communication and oversight. Within 48 hours of my meeting with Derek, I received an email from Janet Morrison, the Chief Operating Officer, requesting an urgent meeting to discuss what she called critical operational concerns that have come to our attention. The message arrived on Wednesday morning while I was conducting routine system maintenance during the early hours when network traffic was minimal. Janet's request for a meeting was unusual because my interactions with C-level executives had previously been limited to formal project presentations and brief encounters in company social settings. Her direct involvement suggested that my conflict with Derek had escalated beyond the scope of typical manager-subordinate disputes. Janet Morrison was widely respected within corporate excellence dynamics as a strategic thinker who had played a crucial role in the company's growth, from a regional consulting firm to a nationally recognized leader in operational optimization. She had joined the company 5 years earlier after serving as a senior vice president at a major management consulting firm, and her expertise in organizational systems and process improvement had been instrumental in developing many of the methodologies that corporate excellence dynamics now offered to its clients. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday afternoon in Janet's corner office, a space that reflected both her professional accomplishments and her practical approach to business leadership. Unlike Derek's formal and intimidating office environment, Janet's workspace was designed for collaborative problem-solving, with comfortable seating areas, whiteboards covered with strategic planning diagrams, and windows offering expansive views of Seattle's business district. I spent Wednesday evening preparing for what I expected would be a complex discussion about my role within the company and the circumstances that had led to my conflict with Derek. I compiled additional documentation about my system administration responsibilities, including detailed logs of operational improvements I had implemented and metrics demonstrating the impact of my work on company efficiency and profitability. Thursday morning brought an unexpected development that would significantly alter the context of my meeting with Janet. Derek arrived at the office visibly agitated and immediately called an emergency team meeting to address what he described as, quote, serious concerns about operational security and unauthorized system access. His demeanor was more intense than I had seen during any of our previous conflicts, suggesting that something significant had occurred overnight. The emergency meeting was held in the main conference room, with all 12 members of Derek's operations team in attendance. The atmosphere was tense and uncertain, with colleagues exchanging worried glances and speculating quietly about the nature of the emergency Derek had called us together to address. Derek began the meeting by explaining that he had discovered what appeared to be unauthorized modifications to the company's scheduling and resource management systems. He claimed that critical operational data had been altered without proper authorization, and that these changes potentially compromised the integrity of client project timelines and resource allocation records. As Derek detailed his concerns about system security and data integrity, I felt a growing sense of alarm and confusion. The modifications he was describing sounded like routine maintenance and optimization procedures that I performed regularly as part of my system administration responsibilities. However, his characterization of these activities as unauthorized and potentially dangerous suggested a fundamental misunderstanding of my role and authority within the company's technological infrastructure. The most troubling aspect of Derek's presentation was his implication that whoever had made these system modifications had exceeded their authorized access levels and potentially violated company policies regarding data security and operational integrity. He announced that he had reported the incident to the IT security department and requested a comprehensive audit of system access logs to identify the source of the unauthorized changes. Throughout Derek's presentation, I maintained professional composure while internally processing the implications of his accusations. It was clear that despite our productive conversation earlier in the week, Derek still didn't fully understand my system administration responsibilities or the scope of authority I had been granted by senior management to maintain and optimize the company's operational infrastructure. More concerning was the possibility that Derek's security report might create problems with other departments or executives who weren't fully aware of my role in managing the company's scheduling systems. If the IT security team began investigating my authorized activities as potential security violations, it could create significant complications for both my professional standing and the operational stability of systems that supported the entire organization. After Derek concluded his presentation and dismissed the team meeting, I approached him privately to clarify the situation and explain the legitimate nature of the system modifications he had identified. However, Derek's response was defensive and dismissive, suggesting that he viewed my explanation as an attempt to cover up inappropriate behavior rather than a clarification of authorized activities. The conversation quickly became heated, as Derek insisted that any significant system modifications should have been coordinated through his department and approved through formal change management procedures. He argued that my failure to seek his permission for these activities demonstrated a lack of respect for proper management oversight and organizational hierarchy. I attempted to explain that my system administration work was conducted under direct authorization from senior management, and that the modifications he had identified were routine maintenance procedures designed to optimize operational efficiency. However, Derek seemed more focused on the procedural aspects of management authority than on the substantive impact of my work on company operations. Our discussion was interrupted by a message from Janet Morrison's assistant, requesting that I arrive for our scheduled meeting 30 minutes earlier than originally planned. The timing change suggested that Janet was aware of Derek's security concerns and wanted to address them as part of our broader conversation about operational oversight and departmental communication. Walking to Janet's office, I felt a complex mixture of anxiety and anticipation about the conversation that was about to unfold. On one hand, I was concerned that Derek's security report might have created negative perceptions about my work and professional conduct. On the other hand, I was hopeful that direct communication with senior leadership would finally resolve the misunderstandings and conflicts that had been developing over the past several weeks. Janet greeted me with a professional but warm demeanor that immediately put me at ease. She offered coffee and invited me to sit in the comfortable seating area of her office, creating an atmosphere that felt more like a collaborative consultation than a formal disciplinary meeting. Janet began our conversation by acknowledging that she was aware of the recent tensions between Derek and me, and that she wanted to understand the full context of our conflicts before making any decisions about how to address them. Her approach was thoughtful and systematic, focusing on gathering information rather than making immediate judgments about fault or responsibility. I provided Janet with a comprehensive overview of my work responsibilities, starting with my system administration duties and expanding to include my analytical projects and operational optimization initiatives. I walked her through the documentation I had prepared, including performance metrics, client feedback, and system improvement records that demonstrated the value and impact of my contributions to the company. Janet listened attentively and asked detailed questions about the technical aspects of my work and the strategic importance of the systems I maintained. Her questions revealed a sophisticated understanding of operational complexity and technology infrastructure that made it easier for me to explain the nuances of my responsibilities and the challenges I faced in managing multiple competing priorities. As our conversation progressed, Janet began to share her perspective on the organizational dynamics that had contributed to the conflicts between Derek and me. She explained that the company's rapid growth had created gaps in communication and coordination between different levels of management, and that some department heads had not been fully briefed on the strategic initiatives and specialized roles that had been created to support the company's expanding operations. Janet revealed that my hiring had been part of a broader strategic initiative to upgrade the company's operational infrastructure and improve its competitive position in the consulting market. The investment in advanced scheduling and resource management systems was intended to provide corporate excellence dynamics with capabilities that would differentiate it from competitors and enable more sophisticated service offerings to high-value clients. However, the implementation of these strategic initiatives had been managed at the executive level without comprehensive communication to middle management about the specific roles and responsibilities that had been created to support them. This communication gap had apparently left Derek and other department heads without a clear understanding of how specialized positions like mine fit into the overall organizational structure. Janet's explanation helped me understand why Derek had been so focused on traditional management oversight and procedural compliance. From his perspective, I was a subordinate analyst who was operating outside normal departmental protocols without proper authorization or supervision. He had no way of knowing that my activities were actually aligned with strategic priorities that had been established at the executive level. The revelation that my conflicts with Derek were largely the result of organizational communication failures rather than personal or professional inadequacies was both relieving and frustrating. I was gratified to learn that my work was valued and aligned with company strategy. But I was also concerned about the implications of these communication gaps for my ongoing effectiveness in professional relationships. Janet acknowledged these concerns and explained that she was working with other senior executives to develop better coordination and communication systems that would prevent similar misunderstandings in the future. She indicated that my situation had highlighted broader organizational issues that needed to be addressed to support the company's continued growth and operational excellence. Our conversation then shifted to more specific discussions about my current projects and future responsibilities within the company. Janet expressed particular interest in my analysis of operational inefficiencies and asked detailed questions about my recommendations for improving scheduling coordination and resource utilization. I shared with Janet the comprehensive report I had presented to Derek's team several weeks earlier, including the data about meeting conflicts, scheduling bottlenecks, and resource allocation problems that were affecting company productivity and profitability. Janet reviewed the analysis carefully and asked thoughtful questions about implementation strategies and potential challenges. Janet's response to my operational analysis was dramatically different from Derek's dismissive reaction. She immediately recognized the strategic value of my recommendations and began discussing how they could be integrated into broader organizational improvement initiatives that were already under development at the executive level. The conversation revealed that several of the problems I had identified through my data analysis were consistent with concerns that had been raised by other departments and external consultants who had been engaged to assess the company's operational effectiveness. My systematic approach to documenting and quantifying these issues provided valuable support for improvement initiatives that senior management was already considering. Janet explained that the company was preparing to launch a comprehensive operational excellence program that would address many of the scheduling and coordination challenges I had identified in my analysis. The program was intended to position corporate excellence dynamics as a model of the operational optimization principles it advocated for its clients, and my expertise in systems analysis and process improvement could play a crucial role in its success. The discussion of future opportunities and strategic initiatives created a much more positive and collaborative atmosphere than I had expected when I arrived for the meeting. Instead of addressing performance concerns or disciplinary issues, Janet was essentially offering me expanded responsibilities and greater involvement in high-level organizational development projects. However, our productive conversation was interrupted by an urgent message from Derek, requesting immediate assistance with what he described as a, quote, critical system failure that was affecting multiple client projects and threatening to disrupt scheduled deliverables. The timing of this emergency was suspicious, coming just hours after Derek had raised concerns about unauthorized system modifications. Janet and I quickly reviewed the nature of Derek's emergency request and determined that it likely involved routine system maintenance issues that could be resolved through standard troubleshooting procedures. However, the urgency of his message suggested that Derek was either genuinely panicked about technical problems he didn't understand, or was attempting to demonstrate the risks associated with my system administration activities. I explained to Janet that I could resolve the technical issues quickly, but that doing so would require me to access the same administrative functions that Derek had reported as potential security violations earlier that morning. The situation created a perfect opportunity to demonstrate both the necessity of my system access and the consequences of restricting my ability to maintain operational infrastructure. Janet made the strategic decision to accompany me to Derek's department so that she could observe firsthand how I resolved the technical problems and assess the validity of Derek's concerns about unauthorized system access. This approach would allow her to make informed decisions about my role and responsibilities, while also addressing any legitimate operational issues that might be affecting client deliverables. Walking to Derek's office with Janet, I felt a mixture of confidence and apprehension about the demonstration that was about to unfold. I was confident in my ability to resolve whatever technical problems Derek had encountered, but I was also aware that my performance would be closely scrutinized by both Derek and senior management under potentially stressful circumstances. We arrived at Derek's office to find him surrounded by printouts and computer screens, clearly agitated and struggling to understand the scope and implications of the system problems he was facing. Several other team members were gathered around his desk, offering suggestions and trying to help troubleshoot issues that were beyond their technical expertise. Derek's relief at seeing Janet was immediately followed by visible tension when he noticed that I was accompanying her. He began explaining the technical problems he was experiencing, describing system error messages and scheduling conflicts that were preventing him from accessing critical project information and coordinating team activities. As Derek detailed the various problems he was encountering, I quickly recognized that they were the result of routine system maintenance procedures that had temporarily restricted access to certain administrative functions while updates were being processed. The errors and conflicts he was experiencing were normal parts of the maintenance cycle that would resolve automatically once the updates were completed. However, Derek's lack of familiarity with the technical aspects of the scheduling system had led him to interpret these temporary restrictions as system failures that required immediate intervention. His panic was understandable from his perspective, but it also demonstrated the extent to which he depended on systems he didn't fully understand. Janet asked me to explain the technical issues Derek was experiencing and to outline the steps needed to resolve them. I walked both of them through the maintenance procedures that were currently running, explaining how they improved system performance and prevented the types of conflicts and inefficiencies I had identified in my operational analysis. Derek listened with growing amazement as I explained the complexity of the systems he relied on daily and the sophisticated procedures required to maintain their optimal performance. It became clear that he had never fully appreciated the technical expertise required to manage the operational infrastructure that supported his department's activities. Janet observed the demonstration with obvious interest, asking detailed questions about system capabilities and maintenance requirements that revealed her strategic understanding of technology's role in organizational effectiveness. Her questions helped illuminate both the value of my technical expertise and the importance of proper coordination between operational and technical functions. The resolution of Derek's technical problems took approximately 20 minutes and involved procedures that would have been impossible for anyone without administrative access and specialized knowledge of the scheduling system architecture. The demonstration effectively proved that my system access was not only authorized but essential for maintaining operational stability. As the immediate technical issues were resolved and Derek's panic subsided, Janet initiated a broader conversation about operational coordination and communication protocols that would prevent similar misunderstandings in the future. She explained that Derek's concerns about system security were understandable, but had been based on incomplete information about my role and responsibilities. Janet used the opportunity to clarify my position within the organizational structure and to explain how my work supported both Derek's departmental objectives and the company's broader strategic goals. She emphasized that effective coordination between operational and technical functions was essential for the company's continued success and competitive advantage. The conversation that followed was both educational and diplomatic, with Janet helping Derek understand how my specialized expertise complemented his management responsibilities rather than competing with them. She outlined ways that Derek and I could work together more effectively, with clear communication protocols and mutual support for our respective areas of expertise. Derek's response to this clarification was gracious and professional, though I could sense his embarrassment about the misunderstandings that had led to our conflicts. He acknowledged that he had not fully understood the scope of my responsibilities and expressed willingness to develop better coordination and communication practices going forward. However, the positive resolution of our immediate conflicts was overshadowed by a more significant development that would soon reshape everyone's understanding of organizational dynamics at Corporate Excellence Dynamics. While Janet, Derek, and I were conducting our collaborative problem-solving session, word of the morning's events had spread throughout the company, generating speculation and discussion that would have far-reaching consequences. The story of Derek's emergency system alert and my subsequent technical demonstration had captured the attention of employees throughout the organization, many of whom had their own experiences with scheduling conflicts and operational inefficiencies that my work had been designed to address. The revelation that a single analyst was responsible for maintaining the systems that everyone depended on had created both admiration and concern about the company's operational dependencies. More significantly, several senior executives who had not been directly involved in my hiring and role development became interested in understanding how critical operational functions were being managed and what contingencies existed for ensuring continuity if key personnel were unavailable. This interest would soon lead to a comprehensive review of operational infrastructure and organizational design that would affect not only my position, but the entire structure of Corporate Excellence Dynamics. By the end of Thursday afternoon, what had begun as a conflict between Derek and me about scheduling and professional behavior had evolved into a much broader examination of organizational effectiveness and strategic planning. The resolution of our personal conflicts had revealed systemic issues that required attention from the highest levels of company leadership. Friday morning brought a series of meetings and discussions involving multiple departments and senior executives as the company began to assess the implications of the previous day's revelations. I found myself at the center of conversations about operational risk management, technical expertise, and organizational development that went far beyond anything I had anticipated when I first reported Derek's criticism of my scheduling practices. The transformation of my professional situation from problematic employee to strategic asset was both gratifying and overwhelming. The validation of my work and expertise was professionally satisfying, but the increased visibility and responsibility also created new pressures and expectations that would require careful navigation. As I prepared for what promised to be a busy and potentially transformative day, I reflected on how dramatically the situation had evolved, from Derek's initial criticism of my punctuality to comprehensive discussions about organizational design and operational strategy. The irony that his attacks on my time management had ultimately led to recognition of my critical role in managing the company's temporal infrastructure was not lost on me. What I didn't yet realize was that the events of the past week were only the beginning of a much more significant transformation that would affect not only my career but the entire culture and structure of Corporate Excellence Dynamics. The conflict that had started with questions about arrival times and professional behavior was about to reveal much deeper issues about leadership, communication, and organizational effectiveness that would require fundamental changes in how the company operated. The weekend that followed our technical demonstration brought an unexpected flurry of activity that would fundamentally alter the trajectory of my career at Corporate Excellence Dynamics. Saturday morning, while I was conducting routine system backups from my home office, I received a call from Marcus Thompson, the Chief Executive Officer, requesting an emergency meeting for Monday morning to discuss what he termed, quote, critical operational infrastructure dependencies that require immediate strategic assessment. Marcus Thompson was the visionary leader who had transformed Corporate Excellence Dynamics from a small regional consulting firm into a nationally recognized powerhouse in organizational optimization. His direct involvement in operational matters was unusual, as he typically focused on high-level strategy and client relationship management, while delegating technical and administrative concerns to his executive team. The fact that he was personally requesting a meeting suggested that the previous week's events had elevated my situation to the highest levels of corporate attention. The call from Marcus came while I was analyzing system performance data from the previous month, a routine task that had taken on new significance following Derek's false alarm about unauthorized system modifications. The data revealed patterns that I had been tracking for several weeks but hadn't yet had the opportunity to present to senior leadership, patterns that painted a concerning picture of the company's operational vulnerabilities and dependencies. Over the weekend, I compiled a comprehensive analysis of Corporate Excellence Dynamics' technological infrastructure, focusing on single points of failure and critical dependencies that could threaten business continuity. The exercise was both professionally fascinating and personally sobering. as it revealed the extent to which the company's operations relied on systems and processes that only I fully understood and maintained. The analysis showed that my departure or incapacitation would create immediate and severe disruptions to client project timelines, resource allocation processes, and internal coordination systems. More troubling was the discovery that several critical operational procedures existed only in my personal knowledge base, without formal documentation or backup personnel who could maintain continuity if I were unavailable. Sunday evening brought an additional complication when I received a series of increasingly urgent emails from Derek, who was apparently experiencing technical difficulties while trying to prepare for Monday morning client presentations. The problems he described were complex but solvable, requiring system access and technical knowledge that only I possessed within the organization. Derek's Sunday evening panic represented a perfect microcosm of the broader operational dependencies that my weekend analysis had revealed. His inability to resolve routine technical issues without my assistance demonstrated how thoroughly the company's day-to-day operations depended on specialized expertise that existed in only one person, creating risks that no responsible organization should accept. I spent several hours Sunday evening remotely resolving Derek's technical problems, walking him through procedures that should have been documented in standard operating manuals but existed only in my personal knowledge base. The experience reinforced my growing concern about the company's operational fragility and the urgent need for better knowledge management and succession planning. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp December air that made Seattle feel energized and purposeful. I arrived at the office early to conduct final system checks before my meeting with Marcus, wanting to ensure that all operational indicators were optimal and that no technical issues would distract from the strategic discussions we needed to have. Marcus Thompson's executive suite occupied the entire top floor of the Corporate Excellence Dynamics building, with panoramic views of Puget Sound and the Cascade Mountains that reflected both his strategic perspective and the company's ambitious aspirations. The space was designed for high-level decision-making, with sophisticated technology, elegant furnishings, and an atmosphere that conveyed both success and serious purpose. I was surprised to discover that our meeting would include Janet Morrison and two other executives I hadn't previously worked with directly: Robert Kim, the Chief Financial Officer, and Lisa Chen, the Chief Technology Officer. The presence of the entire C-suite leadership team indicated that my situation had become a matter of significant strategic importance to the organization. Marcus began the meeting by acknowledging that the previous week's events had revealed critical gaps in the company's understanding of its own operational infrastructure and risk management protocols. He explained that my conflicts with Derek had inadvertently exposed systemic vulnerabilities that required immediate attention from senior leadership. The tone of the meeting was serious but supportive, with Marcus emphasizing that the goal was not to assign blame for past misunderstandings, but to develop solutions that would strengthen the company's operational resilience and prevent similar problems in the future. His approach was characteristic of the strategic thinking that had made Corporate Excellence Dynamics successful, focusing on systemic improvements rather than individual accountability. Robert Kim presented a financial analysis of the operational dependencies that my weekend research had quantified, translating technical risks into business impact assessments that demonstrated the potential costs of system failures or knowledge gaps. The numbers were sobering, with estimated losses ranging from hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars depending on the duration and scope of operational disruptions. Lisa Chen followed with a technical assessment of the company's infrastructure architecture, acknowledging that the rapid implementation of advanced systems had outpaced the development of proper documentation and redundancy protocols. She admitted that the technology department had focused primarily on functionality and performance, while neglecting the knowledge management and succession planning requirements that were essential for sustainable operations. Janet Morrison provided an organizational perspective on the communication and coordination failures that had contributed to the conflicts between Derek and me. She outlined plans for improving departmental integration and ensuring that specialized roles like mine were properly understood and supported by middle management throughout the organization. As each executive presented their analysis and recommendations, I began to understand that the company was preparing to make significant changes to both its operational structure and my role within the organization. The transformation from problematic employee to strategic asset was happening more rapidly and comprehensively than I had anticipated. Marcus concluded the executive presentations by explaining that corporate excellence dynamics was facing a critical decision point regarding its operational infrastructure and risk management strategy. The company could either invest in comprehensive system documentation and staff redundancy to reduce dependencies on individual expertise, or it could restructure organizational roles and responsibilities to better support and protect the specialized knowledge that had become essential to daily operations. The discussion that followed was both strategic and personal, as the executives explored various scenarios for addressing the operational vulnerabilities my situation had revealed. The conversation ranged from technical solutions like automated systems and backup procedures to organizational changes like role redefinition and reporting structure modifications. What became clear during these discussions was that my technical expertise and institutional knowledge had evolved far beyond the scope of my original job description, creating value and responsibilities that weren't properly reflected in my formal position or compensation structure. The company's dependence on my specialized skills had grown organically over time, without deliberate planning or formal recognition of the strategic importance of my contributions. Marcus presented me with several options for restructuring my role and responsibilities within the organization, each representing different approaches to balancing operational needs with organizational sustainability. The most conservative option involved extensive documentation and training programs to distribute my knowledge throughout the organization, while the most aggressive option involved creating an entirely new executive-level position focused on operational infrastructure management. The middle option, which seemed to have the most support among the executive team, involved promoting me to a newly created position of Director of Operational Systems, with expanded responsibilities for strategic planning and organizational development, in addition to my current technical duties. This role would report directly to Janet Morrison and would have the authority and resources needed to build proper infrastructure support and knowledge management systems. The promotion discussion was surreal, given that just a week earlier Derek had been criticizing my professional behavior and questioning my commitment to the company. The transformation from disciplinary concerns to executive-level promotion represented one of the most dramatic career developments I had ever experienced or heard about in professional environments. However, the promotion opportunity also came with significant expectations and responsibilities that would fundamentally change my relationship with the company and my colleagues. The new role would require me to transition from individual contributor to organizational leader, with accountability for systems and processes that affected every department and every employee. The meeting concluded with Marcus requesting that I take several days to consider the various options and prepare recommendations for how the company should proceed with restructuring operational infrastructure and risk management protocols. He emphasized that my input would be crucial for making decisions that balanced operational effectiveness with organizational sustainability. Walking back to my desk after the executive meeting, I felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of the opportunities and responsibilities that had been presented. The validation of my expertise and contributions was professionally gratifying, but the scope of the changes being proposed was both exciting and intimidating. The rest of Monday was spent in a series of follow-up conversations with individual executives who wanted to explore specific aspects of the operational restructuring under consideration. Each conversation provided additional insights into the company's strategic priorities and the challenges associated with managing complex technological infrastructure in a rapidly growing organization. Janet Morrison scheduled a separate meeting to discuss the leadership development and management training that would be required if I accepted the director position. She explained that the company was committed to providing whatever support and education I needed to succeed in an expanded role, including executive coaching and formal management training programs. Sarah Chen wanted to explore the technical aspects of system documentation and knowledge transfer, discussing strategies for creating redundancy and backup capabilities without compromising operational efficiency. Her questions revealed a sophisticated understanding of the challenges associated with managing complex technological systems in dynamic business environments. Robert Kim focused on the financial implications of the various restructuring options, seeking to understand the costs and benefits associated with different approaches to operational risk management. His analysis would be crucial for making decisions about resource allocation and investment priorities. Tuesday morning brought an unexpected development that would add another layer of complexity to the strategic discussions underway at Corporate Excellence Dynamics. I arrived at the office to find several colleagues gathered around Derek's desk, engaged in animated discussion about what appeared to be a significant client crisis that had emerged overnight. The crisis involved one of the company's largest and most prestigious clients, a Fortune 500 manufacturing company that relied on Corporate Excellence Dynamics for critical operational consulting services. According to the information I gathered from colleagues, the client was experiencing severe scheduling conflicts and resource allocation problems that were threatening to disrupt a major product launch scheduled for the following month. Derek was clearly overwhelmed by the complexity of the client's problems and the pressure to develop immediate solutions that would prevent significant financial losses and reputational damage. The technical aspects of the scheduling optimization required expertise that went beyond traditional consulting methodologies, involving complex system analysis and real-time coordination that few people in the company understood. As I observed Derek's struggle to address the client crisis, I realized that this situation provided a perfect opportunity to demonstrate the practical value of my expertise and the risks associated with the operational dependencies that the executive team had been discussing. The client's problems were exactly the type of complex scheduling and coordination challenges that my systems and analytical capabilities were designed to solve. I approached Derek privately and offered to assist with the technical aspects of the client crisis, explaining that my scheduling optimization expertise could potentially resolve the problems more quickly and effectively than traditional consulting approaches. Derek's relief was immediately apparent, though I could also sense his reluctance to acknowledge that he needed assistance with what should have been a standard operational consulting engagement. The client crisis created an urgent test case for the operational restructuring discussions that were ongoing at the executive level. If I could successfully resolve the client's problems using my specialized expertise, it would provide concrete evidence of the value and strategic importance of my contributions to the company's success. Derek and I worked together throughout Tuesday morning to analyze the client's operational data and identify the root causes of their scheduling conflicts and resource allocation inefficiencies. The problems were complex and interconnected, involving multiple departments, competing priorities, and technological constraints that required sophisticated analytical tools to understand and resolve. My analysis revealed that the client's difficulties were the result of inadequate coordination between their operational planning systems and their actual production capabilities. The scheduling optimization required real-time adjustment capabilities and predictive modeling that their current systems couldn't provide, creating cascading delays and resource conflicts that threatened their entire production timeline. The solution I developed involved implementing a modified version of the scheduling coordination protocols that I had created for Corporate Excellence Dynamics, adapted to address the specific constraints and requirements of the client's manufacturing environment. The approach required extensive technical expertise and institutional knowledge that existed nowhere else in the company. By Tuesday afternoon, Derek and I had developed a comprehensive solution that would not only resolve the client's immediate crisis, but also provide them with long-term operational improvements that could prevent similar problems in the future. The solution was elegant and effective, but it also demonstrated the extent to which the company's most valuable client services depended on my specialized expertise. The successful resolution of the client crisis created immediate positive attention from senior leadership, who recognized that my technical intervention had potentially saved the company's relationship with one of its most important clients. The timing was perfect for reinforcing the strategic discussions about operational infrastructure and role restructuring that were already underway. Marcus Thompson called an impromptu meeting Tuesday evening to discuss the implications of the client crisis resolution for the company's strategic planning and organizational development initiatives. The meeting included the same executive team that had participated in Monday's discussions, plus Derek, who was invited to provide his perspective on the collaborative problem-solving process. Derek's account of our collaboration was generous and professional, acknowledging both the complexity of the client's problems and the effectiveness of my technical solutions. He admitted that the crisis had helped him understand the strategic value of my expertise and the importance of better coordination between operational and technical functions within the organization. The client crisis had provided concrete evidence of the risks and opportunities associated with the company's dependence on specialized expertise, creating urgency around the organizational restructuring discussions that had been theoretical just days earlier. The executive team now had a clear example of how my technical capabilities could provide competitive advantages and prevent significant business losses. Wednesday morning brought the announcement that Corporate Excellence Dynamics had been selected as the lead consultant for a major organizational transformation project with another Fortune 500 company, largely based on the innovative scheduling optimization solutions that had been demonstrated during the previous day's client crisis resolution. The new engagement represented millions of dollars in revenue and significantly enhanced the company's reputation in the operational consulting market. The timing of this business development success was remarkable, occurring just as the executive team was making final decisions about operational restructuring and my role within the organization. The new client engagement provided additional evidence of the strategic value of my expertise and the competitive advantages that could be achieved through better integration of technical and operational capabilities. Thursday afternoon brought the formal announcement that had been building throughout the week of intense discussions and strategic planning. Marcus Thompson called a company-wide meeting to announce significant organizational changes that would strengthen Corporate Excellence Dynamics' operational infrastructure and competitive position in the consulting market. The announcement included the creation of several new executive-level positions, including the Director of Operational Systems role that had been discussed throughout the week. Marcus explained that these changes were designed to better support the company's continued growth and ensure that specialized expertise was properly integrated into the organizational structure. When Marcus announced my promotion to Director of Operational Systems, the response from colleagues throughout the company was overwhelmingly positive. Many employees had observed the operational improvements I had implemented over the previous months and understood the value of having someone with technical expertise in a formal leadership position. Derek's response to the announcement was particularly gratifying, as he publicly acknowledged the importance of my contributions to the company's success and expressed his support for the organizational changes that would improve coordination between technical and operational functions. His gracious handling of what could have been an awkward situation demonstrated professional maturity and genuine commitment to the company's best interests. The week concluded with comprehensive planning sessions focused on implementing the organizational changes and developing the infrastructure improvements that would support the company's expanded operational capabilities. My new role would involve not only maintaining and optimizing existing systems, but also developing strategic initiatives that would position Corporate Excellence Dynamics as a leader in technology-enabled operational consulting. Friday evening, as I reflected on the extraordinary transformation that had occurred over the course of a single week, I was struck by the irony that Derek's criticism of my punctuality had ultimately led to recognition of my expertise in time management and scheduling optimization at the highest levels of the organization. His attempts to discipline me for unconventional scheduling practices had inadvertently revealed the sophisticated systems and strategic thinking that made those practices not only justified but essential for the company's success. The promotion to Director of Operational Systems represented far more than career advancement. It was validation of an approach to work and time management that prioritized effectiveness over convention, results over appearances, and strategic thinking over procedural compliance. The transformation from problematic employee to executive leader had been achieved not by changing my practices, but by helping others understand the value and sophistication of what I had been doing all along. As I prepared for the challenges and opportunities that lay ahead in my new role, I was grateful for the series of events that had forced both Derek and the company's senior leadership to confront their assumptions about professional behavior and operational excellence. The conflict that had seemed so threatening just weeks earlier had ultimately created opportunities for growth and recognition that would benefit not only my career, but the entire organization's effectiveness and competitive position. The weekend brought time for reflection and preparation for the significant responsibilities that would begin with the following Monday. The transition from individual contributor to organizational leader would require new skills and perspectives, but it would also provide opportunities to implement the systemic improvements and strategic initiatives that I had been developing throughout my tenure at Corporate Excellence Dynamics. What I didn't yet realize was that the organizational changes at Corporate Excellence Dynamics would soon attract attention from throughout the business community, creating opportunities and challenges that would extend far beyond the boundaries of a single company. The innovation and operational infrastructure management that had emerged from my conflict with Derek would soon become a model for other organizations seeking to optimize their own operational effectiveness and competitive advantages. The first Monday morning in my new role as Director of Operational Systems brought an unexpected visitor that would change everything about my understanding of workplace dynamics and professional recognition. I was reviewing quarterly performance metrics when my assistant informed me that Amanda Rodriguez, a journalist from Business Innovation Weekly, had requested an urgent interview about what she called revolutionary approaches to operational management in the modern consulting industry. Business Innovation Weekly was one of the most respected publications in the corporate consulting sector, with a readership that included CEOs, senior executives, and operational leaders from Fortune 500 companies across multiple industries. The fact that they had specifically sought me out for an interview suggested that word of my promotion and the organizational changes at Corporate Excellence Dynamics had traveled far beyond our company's boundaries. Amanda Rodriguez arrived at our offices with a photographer and a reputation for insightful analysis of business trends and leadership innovations. Her previous articles had profiled some of the most influential operational thinkers in American business, and her interview requests were typically reserved for executives with national recognition and proven track records of transformational leadership. The interview began with Amanda asking me to explain the circumstances that had led to my rapid advancement from operations analyst to executive director in such a compressed time frame. Her questions were sophisticated and well-researched, suggesting that she had already gathered significant background information about my work and the organizational changes at Corporate Excellence Dynamics. I provided Amanda with a comprehensive overview of the scheduling optimization systems I had developed and the operational improvements they had generated for both our company and our clients. I explained how my background in systems analysis and temporal dynamics had enabled me to identify inefficiencies and coordination problems that traditional management approaches had overlooked. Amanda was particularly interested in the conflict with Derek and how it had ultimately led to recognition of my expertise rather than disciplinary action or termination. She asked perceptive questions about the role of communication failures in creating workplace tensions and the importance of senior leadership intervention in resolving conflicts between technical specialists and traditional managers. The conversation revealed that Amanda had been following a broader trend of companies struggling to integrate technical expertise with conventional management structures, and she viewed my situation as a compelling example of how organizations could successfully navigate these challenges. She explained that Business Innovation Weekly was preparing a comprehensive analysis of operational innovation in the consulting industry, and my story would serve as a central case study. During our discussion, Amanda shared information about similar situations at other companies, where technical specialists had faced resistance from traditional managers who didn't understand or appreciate their contributions. She described a pattern of workplace conflicts that often resulted in the departure of valuable employees rather than organizational changes that better supported specialized expertise. What made my situation unusual, according to Amanda's research, was the speed and comprehensiveness with which Corporate Excellence Dynamics had responded to the operational vulnerabilities revealed by my conflict with Derek. Most companies, she explained, were reluctant to acknowledge their dependence on individual expertise or to make significant organizational changes based on the concerns of non-management employees. The interview was interrupted by an urgent call from Janet Morrison, who requested that I join an emergency conference call with executives from 3 major client companies that had heard about our innovative scheduling optimization capabilities. The timing was perfect for demonstrating to Amanda the practical impact of my work and the strategic importance of the organizational changes we had implemented. The conference call involved senior executives from manufacturing, healthcare, and technology companies, all of whom were experiencing operational coordination challenges similar to those I had addressed for our recent client. The conversation was highly technical and strategic, requiring me to explain complex scheduling optimization concepts and their potential applications across different industries. Amanda observed the conference call with obvious fascination, taking detailed notes about the technical discussions and the evident respect that the client executives showed for my expertise. The call concluded with requests for formal proposals from all 3 companies, representing potential revenue of over $15 million in new consulting engagements. After the conference call ended, Amanda commented that she had rarely observed such direct evidence of an individual's strategic value to an organization and its clients. She noted that my technical expertise had clearly evolved into a competitive advantage that differentiated Corporate Excellence Dynamics from other consulting firms in the operational optimization market, The remainder of our interview focused on the broader implications of my experience for organizational management and professional development in technology-driven industries. Amanda asked thoughtful questions about the challenges of managing specialized expertise and the importance of creating organizational structures that support rather than constrain technical innovation. I explained to Amanda that my success had resulted not from changing my approach to work but from finding an organization willing to understand and support unconventional methods that produce superior results. I emphasized that many technical professionals probably faced similar challenges in traditional corporate environments that prioritized conformity over effectiveness. Amanda's final questions focused on my advice for other employees who might be facing conflicts with managers who didn't understand or appreciate their specialized expertise. I suggested that thorough documentation of contributions and systematic demonstration of value were essential for overcoming perceptual barriers and gaining recognition for non-traditional approaches to professional responsibilities. The interview concluded with Amanda expressing her intention to present my story as an example of how forward-thinking organizations could transform workplace conflicts into opportunities for innovation and competitive advantage. She indicated that the article would be published in the next month's issue, which would reach over 200,000 business leaders and operational executives. 3 weeks later, the Business Innovation Weekly article appeared with my photograph on the cover and a comprehensive analysis of the organizational transformation at Corporate Excellence Dynamics. The article, titled From Punctuality Police to Strategic Asset: How One Company Turned Management Conflict into Competitive Advantage, presented my story as a compelling example of modern leadership and operational innovation. The response to the article was immediate and overwhelming. Within 48 hours of publication, I received over 150 emails from executives, consultants, and academics requesting additional information about my scheduling optimization methodologies and their potential applications. Several major consulting firms reached out with employment offers that included significant salary increases and equity compensation packages. More significantly, Corporate Excellence Dynamics received dozens of inquiries from potential clients who had read the article and wanted to engage our services for their own operational optimization challenges. The new business development directly attributable to the article exceeded $2 million in the first week following publication. Marcus Thompson called an emergency executive meeting to discuss the unexpected publicity and its implications for the company's strategic planning and business development initiatives. The meeting included discussions about intellectual property protection, competitive positioning, and the potential risks and benefits of increased industry attention. The publicity had created both opportunities and challenges for Corporate Excellence Dynamics. While the increased visibility was generating significant new business and enhancing the company's reputation, it was also attracting attention from competitors who were attempting to recruit me and replicate our operational optimization capabilities. Derek's response to the article and its aftermath was particularly gracious and professional. He publicly acknowledged that his initial criticism of my work had been based on misunderstanding rather than legitimate performance concerns, and he credited our conflict with ultimately leading to organizational improvements that benefited the entire company. The article's impact extended beyond business development to influence Corporate Excellence Dynamics' internal culture and organizational practices. Employees throughout the company began to view operational innovation and technical expertise as strategic assets, rather than administrative functions, creating a more supportive environment for specialized knowledge and unconventional approaches to problem solving. 6 months after the article's publication, I was invited to speak at the National Operations Management Conference, addressing an audience of over 3,000 executives and consultants about innovative approaches to scheduling optimization and organizational efficiency. The speaking engagement was followed by consulting opportunities with Fortune 100 companies and academic institutions, seeking to understand and implement similar operational improvements. The transformation from criticized employee to industry thought leader had been remarkable in its speed and comprehensiveness. The conflict with Derek that had seemed so threatening just months earlier had ultimately created opportunities for professional recognition and career advancement that exceeded anything I had previously imagined possible. However, the most satisfying aspect of my success was not the personal recognition or financial rewards, but the knowledge that my experience had demonstrated the value of supporting rather than suppressing unconventional expertise in corporate environments. The organizational changes at Corporate Excellence Dynamics had created a model that other companies were now attempting to replicate. The irony that Derek's criticism of my punctuality had led to my becoming a nationally recognized expert in time management and operational efficiency was not lost on any of us involved in the original conflict. His attempts to enforce conventional professional behavior had inadvertently revealed innovative approaches that were now being studied and implemented by organizations throughout the consulting industry. As I reflected on the extraordinary journey from workplace conflict to industry recognition, I was grateful for the series of events that had forced both Derek and the company's leadership to confront their assumptions about professional effectiveness and organizational excellence. The transformation had required courage, persistence, and strategic thinking, but it had ultimately created value that extended far beyond my individual career to influence practices and policies throughout the business community. The story that had begun with questions about arrival times and scheduling practices had evolved into a comprehensive examination of how organizations could better support and utilize specialized expertise in increasingly complex and technology-driven industries. The lessons learned from my conflict with Derek were now being applied by companies seeking to optimize their own operational effectiveness and competitive positioning. 2 years after that transformational conflict with Derek, I stood at the podium of the International Business Excellence Summit in Geneva, delivering the keynote address to an audience of 5,000 executives from 47 countries. The theme of my presentation was Temporal Intelligence, Revolutionizing Organizational Efficiency Through Strategic Time Management, and the standing ovation that followed confirmed that my journey from criticized employee to global thought leader had reached heights I never could have imagined. The summit represented the culmination of a speaking career that had taken me to boardrooms and conference centers across 6 continents. My scheduling optimization methodologies were now being implemented by over 400 companies worldwide, generating billions of dollars in operational savings, and transforming how organizations approached time management and resource allocation. Corporate Excellence Dynamics had evolved alongside my career, growing from a regional consulting firm to an international powerhouse, specializing in temporal optimization and operational intelligence. The company now employed over 1,200 consultants and analysts, with offices in 12 countries and a client roster that included 89 Fortune 500 companies. My role had expanded beyond Director of Operational Systems to Chief Innovation Officer, with responsibilities that included strategic planning, international business development, and research initiatives that were advancing the entire field of organizational efficiency. The position came with equity compensation that had made me financially independent and professionally autonomous in ways I had never anticipated. Derek Miller had also experienced remarkable career growth following our initial conflict and its resolution. He had been promoted to Senior Vice President of Client Relations, leveraging his collaborative skills and newfound appreciation for technical expertise to build stronger relationships between operational consultants and traditional management teams. Our working relationship had evolved into genuine mutual respect and professional partnership. The irony of our transformation was not lost on either of us. Derek frequently acknowledged in his own speaking engagements that his greatest professional lesson had come from learning to recognize and support expertise that didn't conform to conventional management expectations. He credited our conflict with teaching him the difference between leadership and control, between management and micromanagement. 3 months ago, Derek had been approached by a major consulting firm offering him a position as managing director, with a substantial salary increase and relocation to their New York headquarters. His decision to decline the offer and remain at Corporate Excellence Dynamics surprised many industry observers, but his explanation was both personal and professional. Derek had realized that his success at Corporate Excellence Dynamics was directly connected to the collaborative culture and innovative approaches that had emerged from our initial conflict. He understood that his skills in traditional management were most valuable when combined with the technical expertise and unconventional methods that characterized our organization's approach to operational consulting. The morning after my Geneva keynote, Derek and I met for breakfast at a cafe overlooking Lake Geneva to discuss the latest developments in our respective careers and the continuing evolution of Corporate Excellence Dynamics. The conversation was relaxed and friendly, reflecting the genuine partnership that had developed between us over the past 2 years. Derek shared his perspective on how our initial conflict had fundamentally changed his approach to leadership and his understanding of professional effectiveness. He explained that watching my success had taught him to look beyond surface behaviors to understand the underlying competencies and strategic thinking that drove superior performance. I told Derek about the international consulting opportunities that were emerging from my speaking engagements and the potential for expanding our methodologies into new markets and industries. We discussed the challenges and opportunities associated with scaling innovative approaches while maintaining the quality and effectiveness that had made them successful. Our conversation was interrupted by a call from Marcus Thompson, who was calling from Seattle to inform us that Corporate Excellence Dynamics had been selected as the lead consultant for a massive organizational transformation project with the European Union. The engagement would involve optimizing operational coordination across 27 member countries and would represent the largest consulting contract in the company's history. The EU project had been awarded specifically because of the scheduling optimization and coordination methodologies that had emerged from my work and the organizational culture that had developed at Corporate Excellence Dynamics. The selection represented validation not only of our technical capabilities, but also of our approach to collaborative problem-solving and innovative thinking. Marcus explained that the EU engagement would require significant expansion of our European operations and the development of new service offerings that could address the unique challenges of international governmental coordination. The project would also provide opportunities for Derek and me to work together on implementing organizational changes at a scale and complexity that had never been attempted before. The EU project represented the kind of professional challenge that made all the conflicts and struggles of the past 2 years seem worthwhile. The opportunity to apply our methodologies to problems of international significance was both exciting and daunting, requiring us to scale our approaches while maintaining the precision and effectiveness that had made them successful. Flying back to Seattle after the Geneva summit, I reflected on the extraordinary transformation that had occurred in my professional life and my understanding of workplace dynamics. The journey from Derek's criticism of my punctuality to international recognition as an expert in temporal optimization had been marked by challenges and opportunities that had exceeded anything I could have planned or predicted. The key insight that had emerged from my experience was the importance of persistence and strategic thinking in overcoming workplace conflicts and professional obstacles. Rather than accepting Derek's criticism or conforming to conventional expectations, I had focused on demonstrating the value and effectiveness of my approaches while building support from senior leadership and key stakeholders. The success of my career transformation had also highlighted the crucial role of organizational culture in supporting innovation and unconventional expertise. Corporate Excellence Dynamics had been willing to examine its own assumptions and make significant changes based on evidence of superior performance, creating an environment where technical expertise could flourish alongside traditional management skills. Back in Seattle, the response to my Geneva keynote and the announcement of the EU consulting contract created a new wave of media attention and business development opportunities. Several major business schools requested that I develop curriculum and teaching materials based on my methodologies, while government agencies and international organizations sought consulting services for their own coordination challenges. The academic interest in my work was particularly gratifying, because it represented recognition that the approaches I had developed were not just practical business solutions, but genuine contributions to the theoretical understanding of organizational efficiency and time management. The opportunity to influence how future business leaders thought about operational optimization was both inspiring and challenging. Derek and I began working together on a comprehensive case study of our experience that would be published in the Harvard Business Review and used as teaching material in MBA programs across the country. The project required us to analyze not only the technical aspects of our scheduling optimization methodologies, but also the organizational and interpersonal dynamics that had enabled their successful implementation. The case study writing process was both collaborative and reflective, forcing us to examine our initial conflict from multiple perspectives and to identify the specific factors that had enabled its transformation into professional success. The analysis revealed patterns and principles that could be applied by other organizations facing similar challenges with integrating technical expertise and traditional management approaches. 6 months later, the Harvard Business Review published our article titled, "From Conflict to Collaboration: How Workplace Tensions Can Drive Innovation and Competitive Advantage." The response was immediate and substantial, with over 50,000 downloads in the first week and requests for follow-up interviews from business publications around the world. The article's success led to invitations for Derek and me to co-present at major business conferences, sharing our experience as an example of how organizations could transform workplace conflicts into opportunities for innovation and growth. Our joint presentations were well received because they provided both technical and managerial perspectives on operational optimization and organizational development. The EU consulting project officially launched 8 months after our Geneva meeting, requiring Derek and me to relocate temporarily to Brussels to oversee the implementation of coordination systems across the European governmental infrastructure. The complexity of the project exceeded anything either of us had previously attempted, involving cultural differences, language barriers, and political considerations that added new dimensions to our operational optimization challenges. Working together in Brussels reinforced the collaborative partnership that had developed between Derek and me, while also highlighting the complementary nature of our respective expertise and approaches. The success of the EU project would ultimately depend on our ability to combine technical innovation with practical management skills, diplomatic sensitivity with analytical rigor. The first year of the EU engagement produced operational improvements that exceeded all projected targets, generating cost savings of over €500 million, while significantly improving coordination and communication across member countries. The success attracted attention from other international organizations and laid the foundation for expanding our consulting practice into global governmental and nonprofit sectors. Standing in my corner office at the Corporate Excellence Dynamics European headquarters 2 years after the conflict that had started everything, I looked out at the Brussels skyline and reflected on the remarkable journey that had brought me to this point. The criticism of my punctuality that had once seemed so threatening had ultimately led to opportunities and achievements that exceeded my most ambitious career aspirations. Derek stopped by my office that evening to review the final reports from our EU project and to discuss the new opportunities that were emerging from our success. The conversation was both professional and personal, acknowledging the unique partnership that had developed between us and the mutual respect that had grown from our initial conflict. As we prepared to return to Seattle and begin developing our next generation of consulting services, Derek and I both understood that our experience had created something larger than individual career success. We had demonstrated that workplace conflicts could be transformed into collaborative innovation when organizations were willing to examine their assumptions and embrace unconventional approaches to problem solving. The lesson that had emerged from our journey was both simple and profound. Sometimes the people who criticize your methods are actually providing you with the opportunity to prove their value. Derek's initial criticism of my punctuality had forced me to articulate and demonstrate the sophisticated thinking behind my scheduling practices, ultimately leading to recognition and success that neither of us had anticipated. The transformation from criticized employee to global consultant had required persistence, strategic thinking, and collaborative problem solving, but it had also required an organization willing to support innovation and a manager willing to admit his mistakes and learn from them. The combination of these factors had created opportunities that extended far beyond individual careers to influence practices and policies throughout the international business community. As I prepared for the next phase of my career and the continuing evolution of corporate excellence dynamics, I was grateful for the conflict that had seemed so threatening just a few years earlier. Derek's criticism had ultimately provided the catalyst for achievements and recognition that had transformed not only my professional life, but my understanding of what was possible when expertise was properly supported and collaborative relationships were allowed to develop. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.